everyone, and welcome back to Mariana Mass Books. My name is Mariana, and today I am here with a sort of wrap-up, check-in, best-of video because, well, I have been watching a lot of best-of the year so far videos. I have been watching a lot of mid-year freakout videos too. You know, I already did my mid-year freakout, but in the mid-year freakout, because of how the questions are structured, you don't really talk about a lot of books. So today I thought I would talk about my most memorable reads of the year so far. The first book I want to talk about is actually the first fiction book I finished, and it is a graphic novel by Will McPhail. And that is a book I really loved. I gave it 5 stars. I still think about it. I already bought and read Will McPhail's other published collection of cartoons, and I'm honestly eager to see what is his next graphic novel. I love his style, I love his sense of humor, and it is particularly insightful. There are certain scenes that are stuck in my head because of the way he represented them. And it also showed me a different type of book that I can enjoy, because if this was a novel, I wouldn't have enjoyed it, because it's kind of like a slow, contemporary slice of life. It would be a literary fiction novel that I wouldn't read, but I realized that I really like that in graphic novel format, so I am looking for more of those. And yeah, it's memorable because it showed me a different type of book I like, because I still have scenes stuck in my head, and because he's probably an author I'm going to be looking for, you know, whatever he publishes next. Then I want to talk about A Heart That Works by Delaney, which is a memoir, a grief memoir about a father, Rob Delaney, and the losing of his 2-year-old son to brain cancer. This is obviously a super hard book to read in terms of the theme, but it is honestly one of the best memoirs I have ever read. I really loved the combination of anger, sense of humor, and complete empathy and love for fellow humans. It's honestly amazing how Rob Delaney manages to convey so much anger, but in such a loving and funny way, where it comes across as relatable and cathartic. I honestly, truly recommend this book to everyone. Beware of the topic if you can't handle topics like that, you know. But if you can, please, honestly, one of the best memoirs I have ever read. Then I want to talk about Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, because it was honestly a perfect fantasy romance in a cozy, wholesome way. One thing that Olivia Atwater focuses on in the books I've read from her is social topics, social protest, social injustices. So the conflict is not about the relationship and like fighting and the miscommunication. The conflict comes from the social context, and I thought that was super interesting, and something that I honestly don't read often in romance. And honestly, I feel like we need more books like that. And it's funny, it's wholesome, it's romantic. If you like fantasy romance, go ahead, give this a try. This will also be memorable because it's the book that has sent me into the Patreon Discord rabbit hole. I had never subscribed to a Patreon before, and as soon as I finished Half a Soul and I subscribed to Olivia's newsletter and I read her newsletters, I just signed up to her Patreon immediately, and her Patreon has a Discord, and so I signed up to the Discord, and it just sent me into a rabbit hole of Discords, and now I am a super fan of being just discussing and hanging out with people on Discord. So it was also memorable because of that. Then I want to talk about How to Be Perfect, the correct answer to every moral question by Michael Schurr, who is the creator of The Good Place. And this is a book about philosophy, so it is memorable on one hand because it is about philosophy, and I thought it was going to be kind of like a self-help light book, but it's a philosophy light book. It's light in the sense of humor. I also listened to it in audiobook, and it's excellent because all of the cast of The Good Place participates in the audiobook, and I think it's really truly a book that demonstrates how you can take advantage of the audio format. And it's memorable because if you saw my wrap up, you know that after reading this book I finally understand Kant, and that will always be memorable to me. Then I want to mention A Rover Story by Jasmine Warga, which is a middle grade book about a Mars rover and his friend, who is a drone. The Mars rover is called Resilience, but for short they call him Res, and we see him all throughout his life, from the time that he is being tried at NASA to his mission at Mars, and if he doesn't come back from Mars to Earth after years of mission. We're talking decades. So it's a book that spans a long period of time, and it's memorable because this is the first book that has ever made me cry, sob, bawl. So it will always be memorable for that. And honestly, if you like middle grade, like, please, you have to go pick up that book. It's excellent, it's adorable, it's rooted in science. There's an author note that talks about that. It's also based on or inspired by events with Jasmine Warga's daughter, and when you read that book and then you read that anecdote, you will love it. So yeah, then I'm going to talk about the Liveship Traders trilogy as a whole, which is the second trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. There is no way that you have been watching my channel and you don't know that I was going to mention these books. I read the first year trilogy last year. I'm body reading the whole realm of the Elderlings with Elle from Elle Things, and it has been a memorable experience just because I really enjoy body reading books with Elle. We have body read many series together, and it's super fun, and it has been very fun to read a long series. It's a 16-book series, and the trilogy 2 is the Liveship Traders. And after we completely loved first year trilogy, then we read Liveships, and that was like it honestly takes it to a whole other level of obsession, where after reading first year you're like, oh, I can see why they say that Robin Hobb is the queen of fantasy. But then after you read Liveships, you're like, oh, she's the queen of fantasy, like she's the queen. So I'm bending my knee. Yes, memorable forever. I will never forget book 3 of the Liveship Traders. Then I'm going to talk about I'm going just to get it over with the next trilogy, which is Tawny Trilogy by Robin Hobb. Again, I'll probably make a realm of the other things video, because I'm not going to spend time talking about why I love this so much. I just want to say that it was great being back with Fitz and the Fool, and if you know, you know. So yeah, just every realm of the other things book, memorable experience. Then I'm going to mention The Lions of Al-Rassan, and I'm just going to say that this is a book that is like no other book I have ever read before. I am not being hyperbolic when I say I have never ever read a book written like this before. Yes, I have read fantasy that is inspired by the medieval period. Yes, I have read historical inspired fantasy, but I have never read a historical fantasy written quite like this. Usually in fantasy you have either a single point of view book or multiple points of view books. And usually, when you have multiple points of view, you are following different stories, and each character has a story, and eventually things come together. But the focus or the way the author writes is, oh, this is one character, this is another, this is another. Here we're following a story, here we're following a story, here we're following a story. What Gavriel does is he has a story he wants to tell. And then he asks himself, which is the best point of view at the moment for me to tell the story that I am telling. And so there are no set points of views. You do have some characters who are recurring characters, but you also sometimes have points of views of characters that are never come back, of a single scene with a character that whose only purpose is telling the story the best way possible in that moment. So Gavriel focuses on the story, and then he tells it with whatever point of view he needs to tell the story he's telling, instead of choosing your points of views and developing a story for each of them. And honestly, I have never read something like that before, and it's fantastic. Then I'm going to mention the poem of the Cid, which is a medieval Spanish poem. And if you haven't been watching my channel lately, maybe you haven't read or you haven't heard me talk about this poem before. It's a poem from around the year 1200 from Spain. It's a song, what's called Song of Deeds. Is a poem about a knight that is a historical figure, and it was memorable for many reasons, but I guess the main one would be that one of the characters in this poem is or rather one of the characters in the Lions of Al-Rassan is inspired by this poem, and reading them together was honestly a memorable reading experience and has been my favorite reading experience of the year so far. Then I want to talk about the Undertaking of Hart and Mercy, which is a paranormal romance book which is focused on death. The main character, the heroine of the book, is an undertaker, and so there is a lot of talk about corpses and a lot of graphic descriptions of corpses and embalming corpses and that type of thing. But this is memorable for being so death positive. For a while I've been thinking about making a video about books that have made me think about death and why it's so important for me to be death positive, and why I really hate the way death is viewed as an enemy, and how it's something that we need to avoid. And I'm not going to talk about it now because I do want to make a video, but this is a very death positive book, and that was my favorite thing about it. This, I think, has my favorite in-world religion, other than another one that I'm going to talk about, and that is why it is so memorable for me. But also it was super cute, super adorable, super wholesome, super romantic, and it's another romance book that I was able to finish and love. Then I'm going to talk about The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold, and this is a medieval fantasy book about a kingdom in conflict, and the topic is not necessarily the most original. What is the most original is also the in-world religion and the centrality. The religion aspect and the faith aspect and the exploration of spirituality is honestly the centerpiece, the backbone of this book, with a healthy dose of excellent feminism. This is honestly how all feminist fantasy should be, where you are not making up a matriarchy or a queendom, which there's nothing wrong with. I love those types of things, but this is a book that has a kingdom and has things working how they usually work, and then their characters slowly add gender equality in a very real, pragmatical way that is honestly mind-blowing. I, for once, had never heard about a marriage contract in fantasy that includes childbirth as one of the policies. The mentions of a lot of things that are just softly feminist are fantastic. It seems like I can't do a single video without adding a future me, and I just want to clarify what I mean when I say the book is softly feminist, or my comment about queendoms and matriarchal lines. And I just mean that oftentimes when we hear about feminist fantasy, what the story turns out to be is just a backwards version of the world where instead of the men having more power, the women have more power. And what Lois McMaster Bujold does in this is that she presents us a world that is very much reminiscent of how the world works currently, by having a kingdom where the norm is that women are less powerful, and then through her characters she adds gender equality in a way that feels completely realistic and completely simple, in a way where, because you are reading a story that resembles the world as you know it, you can totally picture the world as you know it, adding gender equality in the same way that gender equality is added to this fictional kingdom. And I just thought that was brilliant, because in the end you end up with characters that strive for gender equality instead of a fictional world where there is still one gender that holds more power than the other. This is becoming a theme, and I really enjoyed that. And that is what feminism looks for: a gender equality, not a role reversal. And I'll just leave you that thought to think about. And the religious aspect and the spirituality aspect honestly blew my mind. There are living saints in this world, and the exploration of what it means to be a saint is honestly fantastic. I love the characters, Lord Gavriel and Elle. I love them so much, but it's just one of those books that's going to stay in my head just because of the themes and the spirituality and the feminism. And then finally I'm going to talk about Love and Vermin, which is the cartoon collection of Will McPhail, which again is the second published book of Will McPhail. Oh, it's fitting to talk about this as the last book, because I started this video talking about Will McPhail. This is just a collection of cartoons, his cartoons from the New Yorker and other cartoons, and I love his style, his sense of humor. It's hard for a cartoon, like a single cartoon, to actually make you laugh out loud, and he manages to do that. And just the themes he focuses on and the way he tells those themes, I just really like the way he thinks, the way he expresses himself, his style. And as I said, I'm looking forward to whatever he publishes next. Phew, that would be it. I think it wasn't as long as I thought. I have read between 39 and 42 books. I'm not sure. I have a 2023 reads shelf in Goodreads, and that one says 42. But Goodreads says in my reading challenge that I have read 39, so I'm not sure what's going on with that, but that's kind of the amount of books I have read, but these are the most memorable ones. Another memorable thing I want to mention is Historathon in general. I'm not going to talk about it a lot because I do want to make like a Historathon wrap up. Maybe I'm going to make one for half the year. I do want to just give it a shout out because it has been a super fun experience. And looking towards the second half of the year, I think that Historathon is going to be a more prominent part of my reading, at least this next quarter. I have been reading a lot about the Spanish conquest of Mexico, and I'm just fascinated by the topic. I have been having a blast reading for Historathon this month, so I will probably talk more about that in the future. And what else? Looking towards the second half of the year, you can scratch all of the reading plans that I have been mentioning in previous videos, in the mid-year freakout. When it comes to TBRs, I am very much like Mariah Carey, and so yeah, you can scratch that. I am really enjoying reading whatever it is I am drawn to at the moment, and joining whatever readathon I feel like joining at the moment, and reading a lot of history and Historathon, and more nerdy reading through Historathon, and even I even picked up a literary fiction book, which is amazing. So for the rest of the year, I foresee, of course, more fantasy. I would like to read a couple more romances, more poetry, more graphic work, and classics. I want to read more classics, and I feel like the second half of the year feels more classicy to me. So I do want to read more classics for the second half of the year. And yeah, classics, poetry, graphic works, and my usual fantasy and some romance thrown in. And yeah, that would be it for the moment. I will see you soonish with another bookish video. And you know what I always say. In the meantime, I wish you happy reading.